The talks will be organized or distributed as follows. So we have Michael, who will be giving a talk on Afro-Swedish identity and Pan-Africanism. Rafeala will be giving a talk on Afro-Swedes in history, focusing on her documentary Svarta Sara and what it is to be Swedish today. Samuel will be speaking on Afro-Swedishness and the future. After each individual talk, we'll all sit and we'll have a panel discussion where we'll open the floor for you to ask any questions that may arise, while you're listening to their speeches, and also for me to kind of give the floor to you to kind of ask them additional questions, if you have any other concerns. So now we're just going to jump into the program. We have our first speaker, Mr. Michael McEachrane. Your last?
My speech is not ready yet.
It's not ready? Okay, so we'll start with Rafeala.
Ladies first.
Yes, ladies first. So, just a bit about Rafeala. Rafeala is a Brazilian-Swedish journalist with international experience. She has previously worked as a local news reporter at Sveriges Radio here in Malmö, but currently works as a freelance journalist. Rafeala is committed to amplifying the voices of diversity by telling stories about race, gender, and identity, often with social justice themes. So I would like you to join me in welcoming Mrs. Rafeala Stålkbalk. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we start, I will have to do this and connect my computer to this screen. So I'll go back here. And maybe you can help me just like change the slides when I... So unfortunately you won't see the presentation. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it on?
So when I ask you, you just press there. Thank you. First, I would like to thank Arietta, Jason, and the Museum of Movements for arranging such space filled with inspiration and representation. Spaces like these are so important, particularly for our younger visitors. I would hope there would be more younger people here, but who identify as Swedes of African descent. I will briefly talk about early Black people in Sweden before talking about my own Black Swedish identity, which I normally refer to as Brazilian Swede. Black people have been in Sweden for a long time. For some of us, early known Black people in Sweden are people like Kuchi, also known as Gustav Bodan, who lived in Sweden around 1770. He was a court servant of First Queen Louisa Ulrika of Sweden. Or some of us may also know of John Pansio Toxon, who lived here 1867. A few years before Toxon was in Sweden, there was, go back one please, there was this young lady called Masar Makatamele, also known in Sweden as Svarta Sara. She was brought to Sweden by a Swede called Alarik Forsman and his family. It is believed that the photos of Masar are the first ones of a Black woman in Swedish history. Last year, as Jason mentioned, I did a P1 documentary about Masar. And go back. And now I would like to share with you a short trailer about Masar that I did for Etnografiska in Stockholm for their exhibition called Afrika pågår. And yeah, you can press now. And press one more time. Do we have audio? Okay, pause. Go back. Do we have audio connected? Okay, let's try now. Yeah.
1862 steg en ung kvinna från södra Afrika i land i Kalmar. Hon hette Masar McEachrane. Masar var förmodligen den första svarta kvinnan i Kalmar och kanske den första svarta kvinnan som det finns fotografier av i svensk historia. Vem var hon egentligen? Och hur hamnade hon i Sverige? Den rika dokumentationen om Masars liv gör hennes berättelse till ett viktigt kapitel i svenska minoriteters historia.
So, jump one. So this trailer is a result of the radio documentary that I previously mentioned. It was one of the most listened to and shared on social media. And since then, I've written several articles. And since, I have written and spoken about Masar on several platforms. The reason I mention this is not to brag about my portfolio, but rather to say that it's obvious that there is a big interest in stories about minorities living in Sweden. Yet, very little is taught in our schools about Swedish minorities. With that said, if you would like to know more about Masar's destiny, you can listen to the full documentary on Sveriges Radio's platforms. And in 1990, more than a century after Masar arrived to Sweden, this crew rolled into Kalmar. This crew, consisting of my mother, my brother, my sister, and myself posing in the middle, moved to the very same city where Masar was one laid to rest. My mother, the flamboyant lady over there, was among few of black people living in Kalmar at the time. And she used to tell me that she was the first black woman in Kalmar. Being a child, of course, I believed everything she said. My mother has described her experience as being one of few black people in Kalmar as something positive. She did not feel that the color of her skin was ever a hindrance. She would perhaps even argue that her uniqueness is what brought her professional opportunities and social encounters. I am happy that my mother's experience as a black woman in Sweden has been mainly positive, as that, along with my mother's great sense of pride of her blackness, has affected my personality and my identity as a black Swede. As a kid, when I used to tell my mother that the kids in school would make fun of me because of my big lips, my kinky hair, or the color of my skin, she would say that they were doing so only because they were jealous for not having all of that. This built up my confidence that could not be torn down by words. Unfortunately, my mother's encouragement is not enough when society tells me differently. Of all minority groups in Sweden, Afro-Swedes are the most exposed to discrimination both in society as a whole and on the labor market. According to a study conducted by Länsstyrelsen, there exists a large pay gap between Afro-Swedes and the rest of the population. The pay gap is the largest in the private sector. Additionally, black people in Sweden are highly discriminated against in the housing market. And Afrophobia, meaning hate crimes towards black people, are on the rise. This photo here shows the black woman pregnant in the 8th month who last year was violently dragged out of the subway in Stockholm. Oh, I think my computer died. Luckily, I only had one slide left, and it shows a photo of my mother. as I would like to end my talk on a high note and on a hopeful note, saying that representation, such as the one we're seeing in this space today, is very important. We, especially for us who are parents, have to make sure that we surround ourselves with representation, not only by collecting by culturally diverse books, but also by making sure that we fill the walls in our homes with inspirational Black people. This in order to normalize their Blackness and remind them that they too belong. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rafeala. We'll follow Rafeala's wonderful keynote with Samuel Girma's. And he will be presenting on the theme Afro-Swedishness and the future. Samuel is the program manager at Context. He works as a producer and communicator at Constall C and co-founded the anti-racist, feminist, and separatist platform, Black Queers Sweden. He has previously worked at Tensta Hall, Constall, and with the Cinema Africa Film Festival. Born and raised in Ethiopia, Samuel Girma came to Sweden at the age of 13. Much of his work, art, and writings is based on migration and what it does to people. So I want you to join me in welcoming again Mr. Samuel Girma. Okay, thank you.
I was like in such a hurry to catch the mic, so I came out before the introduction. So I'm extremely humbled and honored to be here. When I was asked to come to Malmö, I said, "Will you pay for the trip?" No. No. I was very much happy, and I thought, like, wait, okay, now I have to think about something to talk about. So my name is Samuel Girma. I am 32. Unfortunately, I'm getting older. I'm a Stockholm-based curator, cultural producer, and activist, although the activist is nowadays low-key, as I am extremely tired and worn out, as many activists, unfortunately, to get that. I moved to Sweden at the age of 13 from Ethiopia. So forced migration and then family reunification has always been a part of our family. So movement has always been a part of me and who I am. A movement can mean so much, but to me, the diaspora identity that I carry with me is a place of a constant search of who I am, who I will be, who I want to be. And I am puzzled and inspired by Black diaspora identities. Afro-Svensk or Afro-Swedish. That umbrella term has made me think a whole lot of what it means to me, what gives it context, and also what makes me an Afro-Swede, and how do I in return express that? How do I embrace that? Several Black writers, thinkers, activists have investigated research on the question of race, or more directly, how it is constructed and maintained through time and space. I mean, while living in Ethiopia, being Black was my norm. So you don't go around thinking I'm Black in Ethiopia, you know. That's what's up. But then I moved to Sweden and I found out, not that I was Black, but what it means to be Black in the world. So that was a really shock. So as I began my journey of finding my identity in Sweden as an Afro-Swede, I was struck by the multiple layers it meant to be Afro-Swede. And that is beautiful. For me, what it means to be an Afro-Swede is our collective and shared knowledges, experiences that get acknowledgement and that we share based on our blackness. The music, the art, the fashion, the literature, the pain, the trauma, and the future. And what it means to be Afro-Swede in the future, for me, well, I've chosen this picture of my son during Cinema Africa Film Festival, as he represents both a future in literally sense, but also black kids whom I truly want to inspire, as Rafeala mentioned, the future, that I want to incorporate a self-esteem that will not be denied by anyone. So the future requires witnesses of the contemporary. And I will repeat that. The future requires witnesses of the contemporary. So what we do in this, yeah, Sonny, you can shout. Everything we are, we document, we rewrite, we reimagine, and we let black kids know that there is magic in being black. And that magic truly lays in the power that we have to remain in a world that seeks to tear us apart all the time. And we own the discourse of what is Afro-Swedish. We make our own context and we own the discourse. And I'm gonna show you a clip and then talk about the clip. I don't know if I should do it myself or... yeah, I don't want to touch somebody else's... I don't want to mess up. So the clip I'm gonna give you, show you is I think it's more than 4 years now, this clip, or 3, I don't know. But so 6 black young girls organized a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Stockholm. And this demonstration was tremendously beautiful, but it was also one of the highlights of many of our lives then, because it truly unified us in a global context. The Black Lives Matter movement truly made sense to us as black Swedes living in Sweden, identifying ourselves as Afro-Swedish, but also in constant dialogue of what it means, and always, always in solidarity with black people everywhere. So, yeah. It's a... I'm going to start from the beginning because of the sound. Also, I want to warn, this might sound like a narcissistic presentation because of me, but truly it's not. We can watch it. It's yeah. It's beautiful images, so the sound is not necessary if it's... This to me was beautiful in many ways. This was young people. This demonstration was organized by, as I mentioned earlier, 6 young girls between the age of 15 to 17. And several other demonstrations, events occurred. And then in 2015, we had the very first black section in Stockholm Pride that we organized. And over, yes. Yeah. And there's an image, I think, that will hopefully pop out of, no sound needed for this one, it's just an image. And I think over 100 black queers and allied showed up for demonstration. It was one of the most beautiful events we organized. And so the term Afro-Sweden and the future to me is what we do right now, what we document, what we, should I say, I don't want to repeat kaka på kaka, but truly what we witness in our contemporary. And as a black queer man, I feel more and more completely whole as myself in my Swedish identity because we do it collectively together in spaces like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. So now, last but certainly not least, we have Michael McEachrane, who will be talking about Afro-Swedish identity and Pan-Africanism. Michael is a visiting researcher at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights. He has a PhD in philosophy from Åbo Academy University in Finland, and has held positions in universities in the US, Canada, Trinidad and Tobago, Sweden, Germany, and the UK. He's a regular commentator on issues of race for international as well as Swedish media. He's also a seasoned universal human rights advocate who, among other things, has helped found several civil society organizations and served as an expert advisor to the UN around the International Decade of People of African Descent, 2015 to 2024. With that said, again, I would like you to join me in welcoming Mr. Michael McEachrane.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. It's a tremendous honor for me to be here. And this event is the first of its kind that I have, at least that I know of, here in Malmö. And this is very special to me because I actually grew up here. Yes, I grew up here. I was born in Ängelholm, and I grew up here in Rosengård, Bellevigården, and Kroksbäck. So yes, this means a lot to me. So it is a tremendous honor for me to be here. I want to deeply thank the organizers for putting this together. I think this is a futuristic, forward-looking event, and I think we should all be very grateful to the organizers for putting together an event like this. So, yes, I have been very busy, as I usually am. I've been very busy, so I have actually not had time to put together a complete full talk. And I'm actually going to Addis Ababa tomorrow for a month. Yes, and I've been busy with that and many other things. But yes, so what I plan to do, I plan to read from my computer about half of the talk, and then the second half I'll improvise a little more. And I only have 7 minutes, so I hope I'll be able to manage to keep the talk within that time. So yes, let me add a few words to what Rafeala and Samuel had to say about. Oh, thank you. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Yes, Rafeala and Samuel, I love your talks. Thanks a lot for your talks. They were beautiful. And yes, so I would like to offer a few remarks on why and how we as Afro-Swedes should fashion ourselves as a collective. Why and how I think that Afro-Swedish identity is inherently Pan-African, and why and how our disparate or heterogeneous, as it said here on the display, and diverse backgrounds as Afro-Swedes is an asset and a strength. As a descriptive category, I hope that we all can agree that Afro-Swede or African Swede simply means all people of African descent or black people, broadly speaking, residing in Sweden, or who may be living abroad but is a Swedish national or otherwise have personal ties to the country. This includes, for instance, someone from Eritrea who has lived in Sweden since a year ago, or someone who was born in London with parents from Nigeria and who now lives in Malmö, or someone who was born in Lund to an Afro-Colombian mother and a white Swedish father. As I suppose most of you know, in Sweden today, approximately 200,000 or 2% of the general population are Afro-Swedes and are either born in or have parents who are born in Africa, most commonly the Horn of Africa. In this descriptive sense, a person can be an Afro-Swede whether or not they identify themselves as such, and regardless of people's personal identities, the term can be used descriptively, for example, for demographic or political purposes. Then, what's up with this Afro-Swedish identity? What could it or should it mean to fashion an Afro-Swedish identity? And why does it or should it matter? I suppose most of you here either have thought of or perhaps have heard someone who have thought out loudly something like this. I know what I am and who I am. I know that I in fact am black, that I hail from or have a background in, say, Somalia, Ghana, or the US. But Afro-Swede? Nah. What does that even mean? It means nothing to me anyways. For one, I'm not a Swede. However, whoever would like to identify as Afro-Swede, maybe because they are born here, or maybe because they lack an identity, let them go ahead with this identity, but it's not for me. In fact, it is true that as of yet, Afro-Swedes are a disparate collective without a joint history. Like, for example, Afro-Mexicans or black Ugandians, without a joint historical relationship to Sweden, compared to, for example, the relationship of many African descendants in France to France, or Afro-Brazilians to Brazil and Portugal, without a joint ethnic identity, culture, or tradition, like, for example, the Oromo people of Ethiopia, Afro-Trinidad and Tobagonians or African Americans have. This is one of the reasons why an event and a space like this one here today is so important as it is a way of fashioning an Afro-Swedish sense of history, relationship to Sweden, ethnicity, culture and tradition. We are all here shaping the future of what it means to be Afro-Swedish. That said, Afro-Swedish collective identity already has a solid foundation to stand on, and that foundation is Pan-Africanism. In fact, Afro-Swedish identity is inherently Pan-African. What I here have in mind is the philosophy of the Pan-African Congresses and conferences that all took place here in Europe between 1900 and 1945, beginning with the 1900 conference in London, followed by 6 so-called Pan-African Congresses, first in Paris, 1919, during the Paris Peace Conference after World War I, then Belgium, London, Lisbon, New York City, and finally a 6th Pan-African Congress in Manchester, 1945, which became a historical turning point for anti-colonial movements in Africa. We have a lot to learn from these Pan-African conferences and congresses in fashioning Afro-Swedish identity. The Pan-African conferences and congresses brought together Africans and people of African descent from across the world with a collective sense. This collective sense was based on an understanding of being a collective for 6 broad reasons, all of which also apply to Afro-Swedes as a collective. First, Africans and people of African descent around the world, including us here in Sweden, share common origins in Africa and similar physical features. Second, Africans and people of African descent around the world, including us here in Sweden, share similar conditions or circumstances as Black Africans, people of African descent. Third, Africans and people of African descent around the world, including us here in Sweden, have shared interests as a group in being liberated from joint or overlapping conditions of discrimination and subordination, and thus to work together towards collective empowerment and emancipation. Fourth, the racism, discrimination, and oppression that, for instance, Samuel and Rafeala mentioned, Africans and people of African descent around the world as a collective, Africans and people of African are subjected to, are as a collective are primarily structural and have international as well as national dimensions, and the structures are similar wherever you are, for instance here in Europe or pretty much any other place in the world outside of Africa. The practices, and fifth, the practices, relations of power, institutions and worldviews of European colonialism and imperialism is the primary culprit of the structural racism facing Africans and people of African descent around the world, including us here in Sweden. Hence, it is elemental to Pan-Africanism to promote processes of decolonization and liberation from colonialism and imperialism and its legacies, including here in Sweden. And sixth and finally, the insight that the conditions of Africans and people of African descent of structural racism, colonial practices, embedded relations of power, institutions, views, and their consequences are largely political problems, including here in Sweden. That is to say, they fall within the ambit of political concepts, responsibilities, and decision-making. Therefore, the framework and objectives of Pan-Africanism need to be largely political. this was the 6 insights of the Pan-Africanism of the Pan-African conferences and congresses from 1900 to 1945 that brought together Africans and people of African descent around the world with a joint sense of belonging to a collective with collective interests, with a collective sense of identity and a collective sense of purpose. And I think that these, if you will, 6 Pan-African principles also apply here in Sweden and is also a solid foundation for an Afro-Swedish identity here in Sweden. And much more is to be said about this, but perhaps if there's any time, we can have maybe a conversation up here with all of you. And so I'm looking forward to maybe saying a bit more about these sorts of things and how this space here today is relevant to what I just said and so forth. So yes, thanks a lot. And let me end by saying, Afro-Swedes, stand tall, Afro-Swedes, Afro-Swedes, stand tall, and thank you.
Oj.
Nu tänkte vi sätta igång, tänkte sätta igång vår paneldebatt, so grab your seats, grab your coffees, and if you have any questions. Is there a mic? Jason has a mic that he will pass around. Get into a moderation role. Normally,
Balance. This is your moment to truly question us as we've never been questioned before.
Right.
Hello, my name is Tawanda. I'd like to thank you for very powerful presentations, and I feel this sense of, being at home because of the people here, but also because of the objects around me and the atmosphere. And my question to you is, how can I maintain this sense of feeling at home, not just in private spaces or not just in these isolated events? How can I take that into institutions, into the public spaces? And perhaps then another question is, how are you doing that? How are you dealing with existing in a black body and wanting also this sense of feeling at home? How do you deal with it in the work you do, especially in relation to institutions?
That's a very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, a really good question. Okay, I can start by from what I do professionally. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a Stockholm-based curator, programmer at Cinema Africa Film Festival. So for me, one of the things, it's very privileged to work with Cinema Africa. That means I'm surrounded with black narratives, black films, black art quite often. So how do I maintain it in what I do, if I understood the question correctly? I truly do center blackness constantly by decentering other things that distracts me. Mainly dealing with racism quite often literally suffocates you and makes you as an artist, or takes away some of your joy because you're dealing with racism all the time. Black people are not supposed to deal with racism. It's white people's problem. So what I've learned later in life, after several burnouts, is how I center my blackness around my art, my work, my literature, my home, my private spaces. It's easier said than done, but truly it is really surrounding myself with, because we do exist, because black people, black art, black everything exists here, finding and facilitating has for me meant more than a survival kit. And I truly am grateful to nowadays see myself as a connector of Black Sweden. I know all of y'all. Uh, so I do that. I center Blackness in everything I do. And I also demand it because, especially in tax-funded projects, that it is, we pay tax. That means it belongs to us too. So I ask the rightfulness of our spot. I'm not asking unreasonable shit.
I think I definitely co-sign what Samuel says. I surround myself personally, but also being a freelance journalist, I get to write what I want to write about, and I try to focus on non-whites, brown and black people as being the central of my. When I write an article, I don't want, like, say, black people to be the victims. I want them to be the economists, the doctors, the researcher, rather than so-and-so was targeted or so-and-so is a victim of this. They are the professionals, like, normalize their blackness. So, of course, that has perhaps a price, being a broke freelancer, but at least I get to do what I want to do and spread the culture and hopefully inspire others. And also, in order to be in this space constantly, I think I've shifted my focus on fighting, instead of trying to fight racism. I don't do that anymore, because other people are doing a great job. Instead, I try to empower black people, particularly kids, by strengthening their self-image. So that's me, like, being in that space. And being in this space, I look for stories, platforms, and this is what drives me, and it keeps me in this constant space. And also thanks to Facebook. I mean, these separatist forums where you interact with other people who want to be in the same forum. That kind of drives me and inspires me, and I try to, like, sudda bort, erase, like, the other noise around it, just to focus on what drives me forward.
All right. Yes. Thanks. Yeah, I think to answer the first of your questions, there's, in order to, like, a space like this. Why this space? And as you said, this space makes you feel at home. This space makes me also feel at home in a way that I would not feel maybe otherwise. And that is why creating these sorts of spaces, creating these sorts of events, creating these sorts of, if you will, infrastructures and so forth, are so important for us to be able to have spaces and have a place and feel at home in this society. It's very important. Now, in terms of, I think there are, you would find many answers and so on, and you've heard two answers here to what do you do to feel at home and so forth, and you might even hear a lot of different answers in how much or how little people do feel at home here. But from my own experience, most Afro-Swedes do have more or less some sense of being alienated and not feeling fully at home here, and including myself, who is born here and also who has a Swedish mother from Girma. But I have never felt as if this country is wholly and fully mine, that I belong here, that I am a Swede, so to speak, and so forth. I haven't even had the opportunity, if you will, to feel that way, because I've always, since I was small, been reminded that that is not something that is, quote unquote, so to speak, allowed for me. So I have dealt with that in my personal way, in different ways. I deal with that still today. And there have been ways since I was a child, in ways in which I've had, say, racist teachers, which I've had, who singled me out as being a troublemaker for no good reason, and not taking me seriously and so forth. You know, things like that. And still today I have to deal with these sorts of things. And me personally, I deal with it in my personal way, and I create my own bubble of feeling at home and so forth, including having a deep interest in what we are here today discussing. And not only in my research and so forth, but also as an activist, someone who, for instance, co-founded and is a consultative member of the European Network of People of African Descent. So that is how I personally deal with it, but I think there are, you'll get as many answers as there are individuals, basically. But for us as a collective, these sorts of spaces are important. We need more of them. We need different kinds of avenues and so on, for us to feel at home and for us to feel like we are in a process also of affirming ourselves and our place in this country, and be allowed to belong on equal terms, if that at all is possible.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nina, and thank you so much for each individual talk, and Michael especially for the indulging in Pan-Africanism and just all those points. I think that's a really important perspective and kind of a framework, and is one that I have. And there are two things. So the word black. I'm Bayesian American. I was born in Barbados. I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, and so I grew up around black people. I grew up, in a Caribbean neighborhood, and then I went off to boarding school and then now I'm here. And and I have my son is now, his father is Swedish, and I have my eclectic background. And I'm looking at my son, and so it wasn't until my son was born that I was like, oh, right. Shit. Like, what am I still doing in Sweden? So it's very important for me now as a foreigner, and Afro-Swede, I guess, taking your definition, to see people like you and to listen to people like you. I've actually known about you for many years, from Buku. You in particular, and then yeah. But hey, sweetie. So like when I see my son, and I've talked to other people who've come from other places and have brown skin, and discuss the word black, and how when our children go to school, now they face this word swart, or black, and what that means. So initially I was like, black is beautiful, black, 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 I'm black. But then I thought, wait a minute, my skin is not black, and it's an outside observation. And thinking more deeply about that and owning the conversation about quote unquote blackness, Pan-Africanism, African diaspora, I've been really thinking like, oh, I'm taking away that word black because it has so many negative connotations and different in the United States, here, how you meet people. Even I speak Mandarin, and even the word black in Mandarin has negative connotations, or used in that kind of way. So my question really is, how can we, take this word, use the word brown? Because if I look around this room, I don't see anybody who's black. Maybe we're wearing black, but nobody is black. We're all brown. And I don't understand why we have adopted and continue to use a word that actually has nothing to do with us. It's an outside observation of something that is not real. And in deconstructing that, I feel like that is really a way to teach people, and how I have used it actually in talking to people who are not quote unquote black or whatever. Like, no, actually my skin is brown.
This is a tricky one. And I don't think I'm the correct person to answer that, because I am black. And for me, I use the word brown to like non-whites. So a Latino, a white Latino is brown. Person from Iran is brown to me, whereas I am black.
Yeah.
And for me, that's not. Sure, of course, it's used in many. I mean, the struggle I would have to kind of not use the word black and defend the word black, it would be so great that I'd rather just empower the word of black. Yeah, you're black, and it's awesome. I mean, and then of course you have. Yeah. Maybe you have a better
No,
answer.
I don't think I have, but I agree with you, but I think also black is a political term. Black is truly a political term. Race, of course, is constructed. Whiteness is not white people, color, they're not white as this wall. But whiteness comes with a set of package that allows white people to move in this world almost free from the obstacles that black people face, mainly because white people set those obstacles. So these terms are political per se. It's not, black, the clothes we're wearing is not the definition, but the blackness is, I love this when Nina Simone says that blackness. It's a political term of our everything that encompasses beyond our skin, our hair, I love the black identities in plural because it encompasses, everyone, as Michael earlier said, like Afro-Brazilians, Afro-Caribbeans. To me, an Ethiopian who just came yesterday to Sweden, or if I had moved to the United States, but this Afro-ness that connects us. It's 400 years ago since the first ship landed in the Americas with the first slaves. Those slaves were enslaved by white people because of their blackness. They were captured. And so that term is so political. So we use it to, and how do you say, förstärka?
Emphasize.
Wow, everybody just gave different. Calm down. Emphasize our experiences, and also because we face discrimination, racism, and especially anti-black racism, it's global, no matter where we are. So that word is so political. We discharge it or charge it as how we want, and for me, I'm not going to take it away. The opposite. I'm going to enchant it even more, but empower it, whatever it means. Because also it's a term, and terminologies require obviously years of introduction, like when the word hen in Swedish came, they, them, hen. The conversation was absurd just based on the term, So I think we've had this term also historically for such a long time. We've struggled with it. We have been shamed for being black. Now we're proud of it. So I feel like we would also lose so much history if we took it away. And brown does not encompass at all even our skin color, to be honest, if we're talking about skin colors, if you know what I mean. So it's a powerful and a beautiful word nowadays. I definitely am black, gonna stay black, but it's a political term. So I think we deal with the political realities of blackness.
Hi, I think you guys are doing a great job, all of you, and the organizers, Arietta, and all the other organizers. I was just going to add on, I don't think we should get hung up on the term black. It's just semantics. If we were called brown, I'm sure somebody out there will say, oh, brown is not a good thing. So don't hang yourself on the word. I think I go more for empowering. I am black, I own it, and I take up the space because I'm black. What is the matter? You know, you are black, and that's what you are. And when you look at colors, white, there really is no white person. My husband is white, but if you put a piece of paper next to him, he doesn't look anything like that. Right. I too, if you put a black piece of paper next to me, or our kids, you know. So let's not get hung up on that. We are who we are, colors, whatever, but I call myself black. I'm Nigerian, so I'm used to this because there was a time when Nigerians, many were very intimidated by Nigerians for whatever reason. But yeah, because I had some friends who said, no, I'm Ghanaian. I was like, okay. Yeah, but I was like, no, I'm Nigerian. Like me or love me or hate me, but I am Nigerian. I'm black, I'm African. So let's own it. Let's be proud. Let's empower ourselves. That's it.
Well, I'm the husband, and it's not easy to be the white guy as well. So, but since my wife said something, I have to say something as well. No, I was just thinking, many interesting issues here. One is, of course, are there any good things in the white Swedish culture or traditions which you like? The other one, are everyone as a white Swede a racist? Is it that simple? Of course, it's difficult to enter the society, I understand that. I am blonde. I was very pale as a child, blue-eyed. But the truth is that I'm half Polish. And when I look at my mother's side, I'm full of Belgians and French blood and whatever. So who is Swedish? For me, everyone who comes here and are willing to take part in basic values which we have been fighting for generations, to be proud and stand up, everybody is welcome. For me, everyone is Swedish. But you cannot fight very basic values in the society. That is a big challenge. And also, I'm a little bit curious, because we always discuss between white and black, but racism goes in all dimensions. It does. That was a very interesting, there have been a couple of foreigners, non-black, but from other parts, who have said that their experience is that the Russians doesn't like Bulgarians, the Iraqis doesn't like the people from Iran, they don't like the one from Arabs. And he said the worst discriminations against black people which he has heard is not from the white people all the time. So I think it's a much more complicated situation. And how do you encounter that? Because that is a multidimensional problem when we talk about racism, which is, by the way, we're one race, Homo sapiens. But I'm very intrigued by that. How do you look, not only vis-a-vis the white people, but other races as well? How do you reason about that?
Yes. Okay, thank you. First, what? Oh, he's on. I think he's on. Yes, he's on. So yes, what's your three names? The Bayesian American Afro-Swede in the back. Yes, please. What's your name again?
Nina.
Nina, and then the Nigerian Afro-Swede.
Lande.
Sorry.
Lande.
Lande. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Nina and Lande, and then finally our white our white Swedish friend here. What's your name?
What's your name?
Peter. Okay. So look, let me just begin with you. And first, I think, how should I put this? I think Peter you might, you know, yes, what the concerns that you raised are all of them what one would call strawmen. That is to say, they are not at all a part of what we're talking about. And that what we are talking about is, if you will, more thoughtful and sophisticated than the questions that you raised. And let me say why, and this is also, I think, you know, something where for us to have conversations, we perhaps need to maybe keep in mind that people like ourselves and others, we have maybe thought about these things more extensively and so forth than you yourself have done, and there might be reason then to ask questions carefully and humbly instead of making assumptions, which your questions were full of assumptions. One assumption you made, which I don't think anyone here agrees with, has never been on the table. And that was the assumption that we here do not think that there's anything of value in Sweden, or that Swedes have nothing of value, or Sweden has nothing of value or nothing to offer, nothing that we cherish. Which, you know, anyone that would hold that view, you know, I mean, that is just patently ludicrous, right? I mean, you know, I don't even see how you could imagine that would be a view that would be held here. So that is one point. If you want to discuss that in, you know, yes, we can maybe discuss that after this event is over. I'll be happy to discuss this more with you if you want to. So of course, you know, that is not the case. Of course, there's not a blanket dismissal of Sweden like this, right? That is not the point. You know, I mean, there's a lot to appreciate, right? And there's a lot of things that people in here, in fact, do appreciate. Then the question of whether or not all Swedes are racist, right? Now, this is a very, and that, you know, being a Swede, you're inherently racist or something like this, right? This is a very difficult question, because it also depends on what you mean and what you have in mind and so forth. If you're talking about, like, for instance, biased attitudes, biased forms of behaving and so forth, I think it's fair to say that there are no Swedes that are always without any biases whatsoever. You know, but you know, this the extent of the biases and so forth, this is highly individual and so forth. But if you look at society, it is clear that Swedish society, in one sense, and I'm not mean this in a blanket categorical way, but Swedish society, yes, I'm sorry, but it is racist in the sense that here there are certain hierarchies of inclusion, exclusion, patterns of discrimination, and so forth. And some examples of these patterns are like this, if you study, if you look at the studies that are available, it is like this in Sweden, like in any other European country, that the people that are most discriminated against on the job market, housing market, in education, and so forth, are what we would call people of color or people of a non-European background. People that are, as they would say, maybe in Canada, visible minorities. Where people of African descent in Sweden, Afro-Swedes, are among the most discriminated against. And this is not just an opinion, this is a fact, right? Now, it is, might be true, yes, that when it comes to, say, biases, group-based biases, this is a human trait that there's no human society, maybe, that does not have some group bias towards other groups and so forth, right? And there might be racism in that sense. But that said, here in Sweden, the biases that influence our lives are of a certain kind, and they are especially difficult for people like ourselves, people, Afro-Swedes, if you will. So I think, yes, I'm sorry for being a bit long-winded, but yes.
Hello. Excuse me, I'm like really sick, so I might cough. So I've been here about 2 years. I'm Black American, and so I'm still trying to find where I fit in. And I'm happy because I do know a few people in the room. Are you up there? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, a big difference. So I've been here, like I said, 2 years, Black American, and I'm still trying to figure out where I fit in and where can I find, I don't know, my community, especially because there's a huge sense of that where I'm from. Like I'm just used to being around my people and us just understanding each other. Yeah. And so here, I'm personally struggling, but it's gotten better. Especially because I have been meeting some people, so I'm very happy about that. But my main, I don't want to say fear, but something that is constantly on my mind is what do I do with my son? So I have an almost 7-year-old, and he's amazing. It's funny, he's like sort of turning really Swedish in my opinion. But I'm always like, no, you gotta stay American. That's just a little joke. But I really want him to find that connection with his Black side. Yes. Especially here, because my child is really fair, for instance. Green, I swear if you cut his hair, you wouldn't even know. And so I just wonder if he will be able to find a sense of himself here. And so I know you mentioned you have a son and you have kids, so like, how are you pushing that on your kids? How are you fashioning that identity with your kids? Because that's what I would really, I mean, because I literally have a fear that I might just need to move back home because it's very important to me that my son get a sense of his identity. And not just obviously Black American, but just Black in general. So, yeah.
It's a very beautiful and personal and difficult question because it's very close to home to me with a little Black boy. He's 11 now, so it's like a preteen situation going on. But it's also like, it's been my fear how society is going to treat him when Black kids, in public spaces are, oh my God, adorable, cute. So when, white people would comment on my son, I would be like, yeah, he's adorable. But then I will fear the day he will be 15, 16. That's when he stops being cute and then becomes the danger of society. So I truly, I feel you on that. And at the same time, I don't want, as an activist myself, I want him to be free from the labor of work. So I would love doing what I do if he does not have to deal with the shit. I love being a part of research about obstacles we face so that there are concrete data for him to know that he's not crazy, that what he's experiencing in society is real because we share it collectively. But how do I teach him is that I truly use like a lot of the things he likes, music. I always like encompass blackness in that. I'm like, did you know that's the black music style? Did you know this person come up with that? But also, it is inevitable, no matter how fair your child is, that his blackness will be part of him all of his life. Your concern already is going to guide him. It's a very individual, of course, thing, but I foster him in surrounding him with black people all the time. And I hope you do find, you say 3 years here, but I hope you do find a community, a sense of friendships that are normalizing my son's view of what life could be, what friendship can look like, what love could look like, so I am truly, blessed with having several black people in my life. Most of my closest friends are black people. And that made him see that the relationship we do, the questions we engage with are always like, that is his normal. And I want him to maintain that. But at the same time, he's growing up in Sweden. So he's definitely going to be, he's black, Ethiopian, that I am also fearing that he's losing his language, his mother tongue. I fear like he's losing his Ethiopianness in a way. And then at the same time, I'm trying to not like rescue his future by letting him just be your black boy magic self, go out to the world. But I do that by truly surrounding him with black people around him all the time, affirming his life is real, his experiences is real. And it's easier said than done. But I do believe for kids, it is people around them that is going to be the one they look up to, that normalizes things. I think the common denominator for a lot of kids that grew up in Sweden, black friends that grew up in Sweden, were the lack of black people in different settings of professional settings or spaces like this where they didn't find each other's adults, black adults that look like them and that could be, professionals. The only way I saw black professionals was in church when my mom took me, on Sundays, which was barely enough. But surround him with people that you are finding. That helps, I would say. I don't know if...
Yeah, I agree with Samuel. I have 2 children myself. And when it comes to the culture, the perseverance of the American culture, just make sure you go all out with the Kwanzas and the Thanksgiving and just instill your, the components of your culture that means something to you. I don't think you necessarily have to move back in order to give him the American culture. You can, by creating your own communities here. And then everything else that Samuel said, surrounding yourself with people whom you want him to identify with and look up to for inspiration.
Just one quick thing, but let him know, everything Sweden idolizes is, at the end of the day, Black America. Let him know, be proud about that, really, truly. Every music genre we have that is major, everything that we take, being the 51st state of the United States, Sweden, truly, at the end of the day, music, American music is black music, that it dominates. That sense of, there's power in that to make that he should be proud of that, his ancestors are behind that geniusness.
Hi, I was just going to add, I understand what you're going through. We have 2 kids, my boy is 18 and my girl is 16. And so, of course, we had to go through that, how to ensure that the Nigerian part is strong and they are well aware of it. One big tip, in addition to what they said, of course, you must surround yourself. You would have your posse type thing, people, your brothers or sisters type thing that you can always fall on and the kids know. But I think the important thing also is taking them back home. At least for me, that was really key. And so, because when you take them back home, they are in a setting, everyday setting, where they see uncles, aunties, men, women, just like you live here, how they, you know, how life is, you know, you see professionals, you see artists, you see people of all levels in society. So that's very, very, I think, very important. And the more often you can do that, the better. So my kids feel as home in Nigeria as they feel here. So that's a key point, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do we have additional questions, comments, thoughts?
Prayers? No.
How do you guys feel? I mean, the ones who are Afro-Swede, do you feel like a sense of belonging? Do you feel that your place is a given? Or do you feel like you struggle?
Hi. I think that, like, the way that people have been talking about having a diversity in our own, just like where my mom is from, where her parents are from, where my dad is from, and having this kind of diversity, and also in the discussion about, whoa, that was loud. Also in the discussion about blackness and talking about it in a plural, because it really is a plural, and our bodies sort of have so many different things in them, and it's not just about, yeah, I was in Africa and then now I'm here. It's a crooked road in a way. I was born in Kenya, and I came here when I was like around 3 with my parents, and I think that I've always had a really, really hard time with my own, me feeling comfortable with being black. I think that has been a really, really, really big thing for me. And also how you were saying about being in these spaces and feeling home. I have a really hard time feeling home. Honestly, I have a really, really hard time feeling home in these kinds of spaces. And it's not because of something that people here are doing. It's not about that. It's about me, you know, growing up outside of a small city in Sweden with like cows and chickens and, you know, not having black people around me. And when I have black people around me, there's been a lot of instances of them questioning my blackness, which has made me extremely insecure about, is this something that I can draw strength from, or is this something that is in some ways hurting, you know? So my question is, I kind of feel this longing of finding other black people that have the similar kinds of insecurities about being black, and insecurities about what about me is black and what about me isn't black and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm saying this because it's the things that I've heard. Even if I like intellectually know I am black, and I know that is something that I am proud of, and it's something that has given me so much love and strength in my life. Emotionally, sometimes that, you know, vacklar, how do you say, it loses its balance sometimes, especially when I feel like, I'm kind of longing to be with like black people that have dogs. You know, it's that kind of like ridiculousness, you know, and seeing a blackness that I a lot of times don't kind of identify with. So my question is, how, like, what kind of strategies do you use when trying to broaden what blackness is, so that you yourself can sort of fit into that?
I feel like I have to answer this because it's so, I love the pluralness of blackness, as you mentioned. Just, I mean, in this space, it seems simplifying just by saying black, as if that umbrella just describes everything we are. I'm going to give a concrete example. So in 2014-15, many of you in this room know who are black. There was a great Facebook group that started, you know, a little group of 30 people were like, hey, I'm black, you're black, we experienced this, let's do shit. And then it blew up. And I think all of you were members here somehow or another. You all know. So this, in that group, that overnight became 500, 800, 1,000. And it kept on growing. And it was young Afro-Swedes finding each other. And like the discussions are worthy of dissertations in that group. How much ventilation it went down, how much tears, how much examining ourselves. And what was born out of that was also black queer people like me. Was like, oh, just because we're black and we're black, we don't share. We felt so excluded in the group because people were being homophobic, you know, or transphobic. So we were like, this term needs to be broadened up. You know, just, we do face the racism, we do face that, but we also are facing homophobia, transphobia in the groups. So we were like, but we out here, we black, we here, we queer. Oh wow, that rhymed. No, but then we started to talk in the group as well to broaden the term black. That it's just not the experiences we share, the bodies we are, but also queer people started to, like, you know, having a dialogue with ourselves. And within the group, we created another subgroup that was like black queer people. How about that? You know, and that's never going to be a guarantee to create an entire 100% safe space, but it was beautiful to broaden the conversation beyond the limitations that is put up on us our black experiences. Quite often, the obstacles of racism that we constantly deal with, discrimination, you know, we are always like defensive, yeah, on the defense, you know, ready to fight kind of mode, and never like ready to enjoy and have each other's back, you know. That, which was also beautiful in the group because we started to form friendship, we started to go out collectively together, we started to go to cafes, like 10 black people would go to a cafe and there would be riots because people would never seen so many at the same time. Literally, in Stockholm, they'll be like, what is going on? Is there a demonstration? No, we're just having coffee. But that term was brought in also in terms of like, there are so many experiences. So other groups that I've known have been formed is like black people who love plants, you know, black people who love animals. You know, so that term, how I handle to answer the question is literally as a queer person by making sure to create spaces that queer people would feel safe. We are seen, heard on equal terms. We're not even like a subgroup. We're like we're standing on our own leg. So that is so important to know. Black is an umbrella term and the political term, but within that, the dimensions are as diverse as black people are, as there are some black people on this planet. So creating those spaces are important. Just because I'm so sorry to hear about you not feeling home, even in these kind of settings. That's because this kind of settings also simplify our experiences, but they simplify it for the sake of trying to catch so much of at so little time. So we need more spaces, more time to deal with these, broadening our experiences.
And I'd like to add to is the society also expect us to be a certain way. You're black, oh, then you like hip hop and you like this and da, da, da. And if you don't fit into that, you know, then it's like, and then you feel you have to fit in. I remember going on a Tinder date before finding my husband on Tinder. And we went to a date in Copenhagen, and this guy was like, he took me to a rock concert. He's like, you don't like rock music, do you? I'm like, yes, I do. What do you mean I don't? But I was like, because I'm black? But he was right, I didn't. But I was like, yes, I love rock music. What do you mean? It's because I'm black that I can't like rock music? So I think also that society, like, you know, expect us to be a certain way. So, yeah.
I mean, this conversation can go on and on and on and on for forever. I think we're going to have to take it offline now because we haven't got time to and a schedule to stick to. But I just wanted to end and pull this together on a positive note. Race is a social human construct. I think we all need to focus on being decent human beings to one another, whatever color, creed, sexual orientation that we have. And that's the only way that we can guarantee the future for our kids. That's all. Thank you, guys. I just want to thank the panelists. They've really given me a lot of food for thought. I mean, personally, I identify as Black British. So I just want to say thank you guys so much. I want to give you some goodie bags from Victoria Henry at Henry Root Studio. And in these bags, we have the extensive work that MME has done on her story, a story of 100 years of female migrants. MME have done that. For more information, please check out the MME website. We've got vegan chocolate, and of course, we've got some information from the Museum of Movement. So thank you guys so much for your esteemed time. We appreciate it. Thank you. The next thing on the agenda is we're going to introduce you to 3 contemporary artists. 3 artists who have brought some work in to show us. So if I pass the mic to Sarah.